Happy New Year and good morning, Olive Branch family, and welcome to our online service. My name is Jeremiah. I'm the Youth and Young Adults pastor here at the Olive Branch. And as you can see, this is the auditorium. This is where we worship together every Sunday morning at 10 a.m. And this is a personal invitation from me. I want to invite you to come and join us one of these Sundays at 10 a.m. in person if you're in the area. We got a seat ready for you, so come and see us on a Sunday. We'd love to have you. But we do have an online service today. Pastor Ken is starting a new series, new series titled Before You Jump. You don't want to miss out on that. But before we go into that, our worship team is ready to bring the house down. So let's give God adoration and adore him and worship him. And then we go into the word and enjoy the rest of the service. God bless you, and we'll see you next week.
I believe you gave sight to the blind. I believe that the dead came to life. I believe there were wonders and signs, and you're still the same. I believe every word that you said. I believe there are scars in your hands, that your goodness is good without end, and you'll never change. I will tell of your wonders, sing of your grace. The God of creation, he knows me by name. The Lord is faithful, yesterday, now, and always, always. Your mercy is mighty, age after age, and all generations will bow down and praise. The Lord is faithful, yesterday, now, and always, always. I believe you will come in the clouds. I believe you are here even now. In your presence I know there is power, power to save. I will tell of your wonders, sing of your grace. The God of creation, he knows me by name. The Lord is faithful, yesterday, now, and always, always. Your mercy is mighty, age after age, and all generations will bow down and praise. The Lord is faithful, yesterday, now, and always, always. You were, you are, you always will be God. You were, you are, you always will be God. Yes, you always will be God. I will tell of your wonders, sing of your grace. The God of creation, he knows me by name. The Lord is faithful, yesterday, now, and always, always. Your mercy is mighty, age after age, and all generations will bow down and praise. The Lord is faithful, yesterday, now, and always, always. You were, you are, you always will be God. You were, you are, you always will be God. Yes, you always will be God. Your mercy is mighty, age after age, and all generations will bow down and praise. The Lord is faithful, yesterday, now, and always. your streams won't find. Wherever it runs, hearts come alive. River flow through me. River flow through me. Your will, your way. Do whatever you want to. Come move, come reign. Let your kingdom invade our hearts. You are the fire that can't be tamed. There is no dark your light can't break. Breathe on the coals, come stir up the flame. Fire burn in me, fire burn in me. Your will, your way. Do whatever you want to. Come move, come reign. Let your kingdom invade our hearts. We won't try to stop you. We won't try to stop you. What could contain your love? We have learned to trust you. We have learned to trust you. Spirit reign in us, and we won't try to stop you. We won't try to stop you. What could contain your love? We have learned to trust you. We have learned to trust you. Spirit reign in us. Let your will be done. Let your kingdom come. Let your will be done. Let your kingdom come. Your will, your way. Do whatever you want to. Come move, come reign. Let your kingdom invade our hearts. Your will, your way. Do whatever you want to. Come move, come reign. Let your kingdom invade our hearts.
It's good to see you. This is my first message in this new year, and I think it's going to be a great year. At least that's what I'm trusting God for. We're starting a new series of talks today. Before you jump, great questions, better decisions. This could be the most helpful series of talks that you've ever heard. I found it, the research for it was just really, really good. So anyways, that's my prayer, is that this will change your life, change your decisions. Most of you have heard the story about four guys that were in a small plane. There was the pilot, and then there was a brilliant scientist, and there was a Boy Scout, and there was a pastor. So they're flying along, engine quit, and the problem is that there are four people, only 3 parachutes. So pilot gets up and he says, "My plane, my parachutes, I'm leaving." So he jumps out of the plane. Scientist stands up and he says, "I'm one of the most brilliant people in the world. The world needs me. I'm working on something right now that could save thousands and thousands of lives." And so he grabs a parachute and he jumps. pastor looks at the Boy Scout, and his eyes well up with tears, and he says, he said, son, I've had a long life, and I've had a good life. He says, and I'm ready to die. He said, you take the last parachute. Boy Scout says, no. He says, it's okay. He says, the smartest man in the world grabbed my backpack and jumped out of the plane. Now, I don't care how smart you are, a backpack and an IQ is not going to help you very much when you're falling 10,000 feet out of a plane. Now, here's the question. Before you jump anywhere, before you jump into the water off of a cliff or off of a diving board or off of, anything, before you jump, you need to ask questions. What's down there? I have a backpack or do I have a parachute? Are there rocks in the water and I'm going to get smashed on the rocks below? The deal is that we all jump. In other words, we do things that, like flying, like driving on bad roads, like lifting stuff when our only exercise for the last 10 years has been lifting food to our mouth. We all do things where if we don't ask the questions before we do them, we could get hurt badly. And there are questions most of us, I think, would be willing to admit, I should have asked it. I should have asked the question. Because regret is an awful feeling. It just is, okay? Our world is proof. Our world is proof that, people who are intelligent and experienced and have knowledge doesn't prevent them from making bad decisions. Sometimes we make really bad decisions, and you're all smart. I know that. And you've got your stuff together, and you're ready to go on with your life. But I'm telling you, there are questions that you need to ask before you make important strategic decisions in your life, because regret is a horrible feeling. I would have, I should have, I could have, Nobody wants to be able to have to say that. So here's the question that I want to ask you today. What if there were 5 questions that you could ask, and if you asked them seriously and took the time to answer them, they would help you to make really good decisions? Decisions that would minimize the regrets that you have in life. What if 2023 could be the year when you make some of the best decisions of your life because you've really, really thought it through? So that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about each of those 5 questions. And so the question I want to ask today is basically this. Before you jump, ask it. Ask the question. Now, this material you need to know is not original with me. We are a strategic partner with North Point Community Church in Atlanta. And I think that Andy Stanley, I know, is the pastor. He's written this book called Better Decisions, Fewer Regrets. And so this is the book that we're basing this on. I just want you to know that the material is not original with me. Now, just to prove that there are amazing, world-class people who make bad decisions, I want to tell you a story that you probably already know. And it's the story of Abraham. He's called Abram in the early years of his life, and then Sarah, his wife. One day, God asked Abram and Sarah to leave their house, leave their land, leave the home country, which was quite a sophisticated country. So they traveled on with Terah, which would have been both Sarah's and Abraham's dad. That's another story, and so on. So anyways, they moved on. They did exactly what God told them to do. And then there came a point when God called out Abram and Sarai, and he said, I want you to go to another country. I'm going to show it to you. I'm not going to tell you what it is right now, but I want you to go where I tell you to go, and I'm going to bless you there, and I'm going to make you a blessing to all nations. And so they went. Now, to understand Abram and Sarai, as they're called at this juncture of the story, you need to know that they struggled with infertility. That was the big storyline in their lives. So God said, I'm going to bless you. I'm going to bless all nations through you. But they didn't have a child. And so they went anyways. They listened to what he said. But this was a big deal. Now, in our culture, it's really tough if you don't have children. If you struggle with infertility, you want to. Lori and I have been there. We spent 5 years in that mode, and it is tough. But I'm telling you, in that era of time, which would have been about 2000 BC, this was a huge deal. Because without descendants, you didn't have anybody to pass your story on to. You didn't have anybody to pass your property on to. You were considered to be inferior in that culture if you didn't have children, that there was something wrong with you, that God was displeased with you, that you had screwed up somewhere along the way. So this was a big deal, okay? And this became their story. They lived it every day. They asked questions about it. They agonized over it. It preoccupied them. They were frustrated with it. It made them feel like they were less than everyone else. And I'm sure probably talked to God, I'm guessing, on a regular basis. Why, God? Why don't you give us children, okay? Now, how could God make a great nation of them if they didn't have any children? And that was where they struggled. How can it actually happen? By the time they left where they were in Sarai was 60 years old, Abram was 70. So you got to understand, like the biological clock is like ringing, it's going off the charts, okay? So Sarah one day proposed a solution to their problem, and all of these factors came into the plan. And then Abraham had a decision to make. Now, Sarai, Abram's wife, had not been able to bear children for him, but she had an Egyptian servant named Hagar. So Sarai said to Abram, "The Lord has prevented me from having children. Go and sleep with my servant. Perhaps I can have children through her." Abraham agreed with Sarai's proposal, so Sarai, Abram's wife, took Hagar, the Egyptian servant, and gave her to Abraham as a wife. This happened 10 years after Abram had settled in the land of Canaan. So Abram had sexual relations with Hagar, and she became pregnant. Now, two things to notice about this. First of all, Sarai blames her infertility on God. He says, this is a decision that God has made, against me. So that's a problem, I guess, in my book. The Lord has prevented me from having a child. Now, Sarai's strategy was for him to have a baby through Hagar. By the way, Hagar is not, kind of a place that sells men's slacks. This is a woman. It'd be common this was a common thing in that country, in that era of history. In our culture, doing something like this would be as common as, let's say, in vitro fertilization or something along that line. Now, there's not a clue in this story, okay, that Abram put up a fight at all, okay? It says, "You want me to have sex with your servant?" Well, a guy's got to do what a guy's got to do, Desperation, and this is where they were, desperation causes the best of people to reconsider their faith and reconsider their core values. Because you see, I think Abraham probably knew that this was not a good idea, maybe in the core and so on. He knew the revelation that, a man leaves his father and mother and becomes one with his wife, and stays with her. And they put it together and they stay that way. This is not like, a man, leaves his father and mother and becomes one with one woman and then one with another woman and one with another woman, and then they kind of create a family out of it. He knew that, okay? He knew that it wasn't right. But in a crisis, we many times rationalize what we know. And I would spell rationalize as RATIONALLIES. These are lies that we tell ourselves, to kind of take the blame off of us and kind of put it on somebody else and so on. So in a crisis, many times we do that. Now, what neither Abram or Sarai expected out of this was the fact that Hagar wasn't some baby machine. This was a woman who had feelings. This is a woman who had a family. This is a woman who had, emotions. This was a real live person with real attitudes, okay? Which is a little bit what you see here, okay? But when Hagar knew that she was pregnant, she began to treat her mistress, Sarai, with contempt. Then Sarai said to Abram, this is an interesting twist, "This is all your fault. I put my servant into your arms, and now she's pregnant, and she treats me with contempt. The Lord will show you who's wrong, you or me." Again, this kind of it goes a little bit beyond me. Abram replied, "Look, she's your servant, so deal with her as you see fit." Then Sarai treated Hagar so harshly that she finally ran away. Now, looking back over 4,000 years of history, it's a little bit hard to, kind of make, scrutinize somebody's decisions. I mean, this is a long time ago. Cultures were way different. Habits were way different. So, I just want to proceed with caution here. I don't want to be unfair. But here's the deal. Abraham and Sarah were under pressure with time and also with the cultural factors that were going on back then. And they did what somebody else in that culture would feel free to do. Okay? And I do think that Abraham could have made a much better decision on this if he had asked God, God, what do you want me to do? Okay? You promised that you're going to create a nation out of me, so please help me to make a good decision. We aren't told what happened, but to the best of my knowledge, he didn't do that. And so he did what Sarai told him to do. His wife, his hormones, and the pressure, from the culture kind of made the decision. Now, we all ask questions when we make decisions, but most of them are pretty self-centered. They're questions like, well, will this make me happy? Will it be fun? Will it make me feel good? Will it hurt anybody? Is anybody looking? Those are the kinds of things that we ask, okay? But the right questions help you to see things and think through things that you hadn't even thought of. Things that are still out there and so on, and get past your emotions and get past your appetites and make a really good decision. So, one of the things that should come up here is the question, has jealousy ever changed? There was jealousy back then, and there's jealousy now, and it's a pretty ugly thing. And, there were lots of different things. Sarah, as she's later called, probably should have thought something along this line. Well, me standing outside while Abraham, my husband, is having sex with Hagar in the tent, is that memory ever going to go away? How am I going to feel about this, a year from now, Will it affect my relationship with Hagar? Abraham should have thought about that too, How am I going to feel about this child when this child represents something that I couldn't have? And will it be my child or will it be Hagar's child, And then, in the future, when this child inherits everything, how am I going to feel about that? How am I going to feel when this child, this son of Hagar, is the one who makes the decision about which nursing home I'm going to be in? There are lots of different things that should have probably come up then. So Hagar runs off. She's out in the desert, she's crying and so on, and angry and so on because of what had happened. It's really interesting, God doesn't say, good move, Hagar, you got to get out there. I'd talk to your union rep if I were you. No, it says, the angel of the Lord said to her, return to your mistress and submit to her authority. This is something we never want to hear, is it? And then he added, I will give you more descendants than you can count. And the angel also said, you are now pregnant and will give birth to a son. You are to name him Ishmael, which means God hears. For God has heard your cry of distress. The son of yours will be a wild man, as untamed as a wild donkey. By the way, history kind of proves that this was actually true, what he had to say about Ishmael here. He will raise his fist against everyone, and everyone will be against him. Yes, he will live in open hostility against all of his relatives. And thereafter, Hagar used another name to refer to the Lord who had spoken to her. She said, you are the God who sees me, El Roi. And she also said, have I truly seen the one who sees me? That's the name, a new name for God. And it's this story that reveals this particular name, that God is the one who sees us wherever we are, whatever circumstances we find ourselves in. Now, it'd be very, great to think, wow, problem solved. They got out, everything all settled out and so on. But God still had work to do because there was still the blessing that had to come to Abraham and Sarah that he had promised them. And you know the story. Sarah's 90 years old when she finally gives birth to Isaac, and Abraham at that point is 100 years old. And they give him the name Laughter because the first time, Abraham heard it, this was going to happen, he fell on his face laughing, And Sarah, when she heard it, she's behind the tent flaps snickering. God says, you laughed. He says, no, I didn't. Yes, you did. I heard you, So this laughter, and you can just understand, this is crazy moment, Two old geezers chasing a toddler around a tent, not a tooth among the three of them, But it's very hard to believe, okay? But if God can create a person out of a handful of dirt, he can surely do this. So they had this big celebration when Isaac was born, but not everybody was happy. Listen to this. When Isaac grew up and was about to be weaned, Abraham prepared a huge feast to celebrate the occasion. It's a coming out party, okay? But Sarah saw Ishmael, the son of Abraham, and her Egyptian servant Hagar making fun of her son Isaac. Wow, this is where the mama bear comes out, right? So she turned to Abraham and demanded, "Get rid of that slave woman and her son. He is not going to share in the inheritance with my son Isaac. I won't have it." This upset Abraham very much because Ishmael was his son. But God told Abraham, "Do not be upset over the boy and your servant. Do whatever Sarah tells you, for Isaac is the son through whom your descendants will be counted. But I will also make a nation of the descendants of Hagar's son because he is your son." Abram's name was changed to Abraham, which means father of nations, as opposed to exalted father. And again, the historical record of Ishmael here is quite accurate because he grew up and he was basically opposed to just about everybody. I mean, he went around with a chip on his shoulder. You know, he was raised by a single mom out in the desert and so on. And since then, which is interesting, since then, for 4,000 years, the descendants of Ishmael have been opposed to the descendants of Isaac. 4,000 years. That's crazy, isn't it? And here's where we learn. Our decisions have consequences. Sometimes they have consequences for years. Sometimes they have consequences for decades. Sometimes they have consequences for centuries. Sometimes they have consequences for millennia. I mean, you think about it, you know, George Washington, they wanted him to be the first, they wanted him to be king over the United States. Can you imagine if he had agreed to that? It was a decision he had to make. But can you imagine him being king and the United States having a king? That would be a problem. Abraham never thought about the fact that this would likely blow up Sarah's and Hagar's relationship. Never thought about that. Never thought about that once, I don't think. He never thought about the fact that this son of his that he loved was going to be raised as a single child in the desert. That basically sending Hagar and Ishmael out would be the equivalent of a death sentence, because it says that, that she went out there and she sat down by a tree, she put him someplace else because she thought, he's going to die and I'm going to die. This was the death sentence for making fun of Isaac. Now, in the very next story, in this account with Sarah and Hagar, after Sarah and Hagar, Abraham makes a bad decision. And the reason I'm including this in here is because the guy that he hurts with this decision makes a comment. It's Abimelech, and he kind of lies about who Sarah is, that she's his sister, not his wife, and so on. So this creates incredible complications. Almost takes out this guy and all of his family members. So this is a serious deal. Listen to what he says. He says this: "Why would you treat me like this? What were you thinking?" And that's the question that you ask when you struggle with regret, isn't it? What in the world was I thinking? Where did I put my brain that day? Well, problem is, that many times we don't think because there are lots of other factors that come in on decisions. We're not asking the right kind of questions. We're not thinking it through. We're telling ourselves the story that we would like to hear. We're rationalizing it, okay? Now, what we feel when we're in kind of a self-created mess is one of the worst feelings in the world. It's regret. I hate the feeling. I hate that feeling, okay? It's not, bad, when you swallow the sales pitch, for the granite stone, ware pan, for $29.95, and you pay for it and you realize it's worth about half that much, okay? That's, that's you kind of laugh at yourself for doing something like that. But you spend yourself into $20,000 worth of, consumer debt, that's a problem, okay? It's way different. Going out on a date with Mr. or Miss Wrong, that happens. You can laugh about it later, complain about it later, but to marry them and have children with them, that's a whole other thing, isn't it? So here's where we're going with this series, okay? You and I make millions of decisions in a lifetime. I'm guessing you probably made 100 decisions, well, at least have made 100 decisions by the end of this day. What you're going to eat for breakfast, and whether you're going to put cream in your tea or coffee or whatever, and what you're going to wear, and what you're going to do for lunch, what you're going to watch on TV, and things like that. You made a decision about whether or not you were going to watch this online. So we make these decisions, and they're little decisions that kind of accumulate during a day. So I figure that if a person makes 100 decisions a day, which I think is a no-brainer, that they will, by the time they're 90, make over 3 million decisions. Most of them don't make any difference, okay? It's not a big deal. Now, some decisions that you make are not necessarily intentional, but they have a long-term impact. I was on my way to church back in October one morning, and I took a way that I almost never take coming to church, and in the process, I got T-boned up at the intersection just above the church here, so I had to get another car and just on. Now, I wasn't hurt, fortunately, but I mean, it just all of a sudden complicates your life. It's not necessarily a decision that, if you thought through, you would have made a different one. It just happened that way, okay? But the truth is that most of us know when we're going to make a decision that's going to have some implications and potentially create some regret. I think we'd be playing dumb, maybe lying, really, if we said, well, I didn't know that this was going to create this financial mess and put us into debt, and hurt my kids and damage my reputation and cost me in my marriage, We know, we just don't want to think about it. We're kind of playing the lottery with our future. And what happens is that when we make a bad decision, it many times forces us into another decision that we have to then make. So we're on the right path. We make a decision at this point, and it's the wrong decision, so it goes down here. So sometimes instead of saying, oops, I need to get back on track here, we make another bad decision, and we keep on going down, and we make another bad decision, and then we keep on making another bad decision. It's kind of like, if you've ever seen pictures of fish that are all tangled up in a fish net, and they die that way. Sometimes that happens. We just keep on making bad decisions, and we're flopping around, writhing around, twirling around in this, and it just chokes the life out of us. I once heard somebody say, if I could kick the person most responsible for, most of the bad decisions I've made, I wouldn't be able to sit down for weeks, which is probably true, okay? Now, here's the deal. Choice is one of God's greatest gifts to human beings. We have the ability to make a choice. Right now, living in North America, we have more choices than any person has ever had in history. You go into the local supermarket, and you can choose from, there's usually about 30,000 items on the shelves there. And if you live in this part of the world, the greater Toronto area, then, you have all, not just like the food that you're used to eating, but you have food from lots of different other countries that, you would never be offered any place else. You think about entertainment choices. You don't just get like 3 or 4 channels like, you used to be able to get a number of years ago. You have, thousands of options, with Netflix and everything else. Music is like spiraled out there. Spotify, you can listen to just about anything. So we have all these choices when it comes to life. And here's what we need to understand. When it comes to the really important decisions, especially, our decisions chart the course for our lives. They write the story of we write our own story one decision at a time. Now, the second thing is that we need to take responsibility for them. And it's only when we take responsibility for them that we don't spiral out of control and end up in regret. We just have to be honest about the decisions that we make and where they're leading us. I remember hearing a pastor once talk about the fact that a young couple came to him, and they were telling him about his dream home, and he just had to have this home. And he stopped them and he asked them the question, like, are you buying a home or are you buying a prison? Because they wouldn't have money to do anything else. That's just money. But there are consequences. See, lifestyles and actions don't just happen in a vacuum someplace, We make decisions, and it brings about other decisions. I mean, if you choose that you're going to live it up and you're going to sleep around, and you're going to just, spend your money however you want, whatever, and you're going to spend your time on dumb things, those all have consequences. They do. That's just a fact of life. And not only are there consequences, there are also memories. You have the memories of what you did, and they come back to you in the night. They show up unexpectedly when you would prefer to think about something else. Then there's the story sometimes that you have to cover up because you don't want anybody to know about it. And then that's where you get into rational lies. They make sense to you, but you're basically doing cover-up work and so on. And you try to, convince the people around you, that you made a good decision. The truth is that right now, I am where I am because of the decisions I've made. I've decided myself right into it. Whether it's good or whether it's bad, I've decided myself into where I am right now. So there's this decision pipeline that we have, okay? So all through life we make the decisions, and sometimes the consequences of our decisions don't come out of the other end right away. But there's good stuff, and then like the internet, there's bad stuff that comes out of that pipeline. And what you want to do is, what you want to think about is the fact that at some point, the decisions that you make are going to either be good stuff or they're going to be bad stuff. I mean, there's neutral stuff that doesn't really make any difference. Galatians 5 tells us that we make our decisions according to the flesh. In other words, what it's talking about is just the way most people make decisions. When you think about yourself, you think about what you want at that time. He said, what comes out of that pipeline is sexual immorality, idolatry, anger, witchcraft, division, all kinds of stuff that you don't want in your life. And then he goes on to say, he says, but the way of the Spirit, the fruit of the Spirit, the result of the Spirit working in your life, the kind of decisions that come out of that pipeline, love, joy, peace, patience, goodness, kindness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control, the things that we want to see come out of our lives. But it's the decisions that we make at those times. Now, I think most of us want to make really good decisions. I do, I don't want to make a decision that's going to capsize things and ruin my life and hurt other people. I don't want to make that. But the tough, non-negotiable thing that I have to realize is that, I have been there for every single decision that I've ever made in my life. I was a part of it. I've left my DNA and my fingerprints all over it, okay? And sometimes I've learned from my regret, sometimes I haven't. The same with you. See, there is no clear connection between knowing the right thing to do and actually doing it. Now, the way some people make decisions kind of gets them off. First of all, some people make decisions in reactive mode. You've heard of, ready, aim, fire, kind of the thing that they use in the military. For some people, it's ready, fire, aim. Okay, like they shoot off something, their mouth or whatever, and before they actually even think about it and aim. So that sometimes creates a problem. For other people, it's more like ready, aim, 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 aim. I mean, they never make the decision, and sometimes people actually wait too long, and the opportunity has passed that they don't actually get a chance to make the decision. But there are two other factors that are really, really important to understand. See, this making a decision is not just an intellectual thing, where I'm going to choose stock A and this will, yield me result A, or choose stock B and this will yield me result B. That's not it at all, because our emotions and our appetites get involved in the whole thing. And what happens is, that our emotions can keep us from making good decisions. I mean, you think of Sarah. Sarah, was making a decision about her future, about this baby, about what she wanted to have happen. But her emotions, the feelings that she had about wanting a baby and so on, were certainly affecting the decision that she made. Appetites. Our appetites, the rule that we've talked about there, that you feed an appetite and it grows. And that's the problem, whatever appetite it is, whether it's for food or whether it's for money or sex or whatever it is, you feed it, and it's not like it just stays there and calms down once you feed it, man. It grows. And what can happen is it can squish your decisions, There's always the reality, and the appetites sometimes will crush your decisions in the middle of it. But bad decisions ultimately make us unhappy, and sometimes miserable. See, this is the crazy part. At times, we plan. We make decisions that lead to our own plan, and we actually plan out the process. I mean, you think about somebody, who, has a bad marriage. It takes a lot of time to plan a wedding and to go through all the different things and the paperwork and all this stuff that you go through. And They're marrying a person that they're incompatible with, and they've spent a whole lot of time doing it. Sometimes people, just don't do the kind of market research that they need to when they're starting a business. And so they go through all the strategic, planning that goes into starting a business, and they basically plan to start a business that's actually not going to work. It's going to crash and burn. Sometimes people actually put a lot of planning, a lot of thought into, getting a house that they can't afford. There's a lot of work that goes into it. And they have planned, strategically planned, to be in a situation that is going to bring a lot of regret. You get that, right? We plan our own regret. Why? Well, sometimes it's because it has to do with our appetites and our emotions. Those things are figuring in. We want to be a successful person. We want to make money as fast as we possibly can. There's lots of different things that figure into this, We fall in love with an idea. We fall in love with a person or a car or a house, and then we sell ourselves on it. And we're suckers for our own sales pitch. Let's go back to Abraham, okay? Because this is kind of an interesting story. Think the emotions had a part in this story? I think they probably did. I would say that the emotion of desperation, which sometimes gets into the most important decisions that we make, like marriage, was certainly a factor in this decision. And there's another interesting phenomena here. I mean, Sarah is the one that comes to Abraham and says, I'm not obviously going to have any children, so why don't you sleep with Hagar and we'll get a child through her. And then she basically comes back and blames Abraham for it. What's that about? Well, that's many times what we do. We look, a decision, and she says, this is all your responsibility. May God judge between me and you. It's like, well, maybe both of you are responsible for it. And sometimes, this is to everybody. Sometimes the person that you know best, you better not let them talk you into bad decision. Because they can do that, and Abraham certainly played a part in here. And this is where the appetite comes in, with Abraham. I mean, he basically, says, well, have a baby with hair. Oh, I think that might be a good idea. How about if I go do that, Never thinking about how this is going to affect their future. I think there was an appetite there. Appetites can sabotage us when it comes to our relationships. Now, who would ever guess that we'd be reading their story 4,000 years after it was written, or at least after it was recorded in oral tradition? I mean, it's all legacy stuff. It's all legacy stuff. And that's the way it is with us too, you see. We make decisions, and sometimes we flip them off. Sometimes we just don't think through them carefully, not realizing or thinking about the fact that this is going to be part of the story. This was the story that got told to Isaac. This is the story that Isaac told to Jacob and Esau. This is the story that got told down through history that became part of the official record. And it affects our families. It affects our families. It affects everything. It affected Ishmael. It affected Hagar. It affected Isaac. It affected, with all the pressures that were on them. Sometimes we make decisions that affect our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren. That happens. Could be that happened to your family. That you had a dad and he didn't put down the bottle. And what he did, for whatever reason, affected your family, affected how you grew up. Maybe you had a mom that ran off with somebody else. She made a bad decision and you suffered the effects of it. You're still suffering the effects of it. It happens. Sometimes, parents, families make really bad financial decisions, and it affects everyone in the family for years to come, whether or not kids go to college, just lots of different things. My dad got out of the Navy back in, it would have been 1946 at the time. He'd seen some horrible things, and like a lot of guys back then, they weren't prepared for it. I mean, he was, 17 or 18 when he went into the Navy, and 18 when his ship got... So he saw horrible, horrible things, and it affected him, and he turned to the bottle to try and ease some of the pain. After he'd been out of the Navy for a while and so on, God got a hold of his heart, and he turned away from alcohol, set down the bottle, threw away the bottle for good. And his decision had a profound impact on my life. Where would I have been if he hadn't done that? Where would, my brother and sister, my whole family be if he hadn't done that, made that decision? It affected everybody. His brother John, tragically, didn't or couldn't put the bottle away and lived as an alcoholic, and his alcoholism affected his wife, his marriage, his work. I mean, it affected everything. It's just a real tragedy. Never got out of it and eventually took his life. See, we can't hide the embarrassing chapters from the book that tells our story. But what happens is we can basically eliminate them. You can't rip them out of the book, but we can keep them from being written. And that's, I think, what we want to have happen, right? You don't want a bad chapter in your book. These 5 questions that we're going to talk about, you and I are walking toward life, and hope is what we want most. We want hope for our future. We want hope for our kids. We want hope for our finances. We want hope for all of eternity. That's what we want. But we get to a point where we make a decision, and sometimes if we don't get off the path, it leads to pain and leads to regret. And that's why it is so important to make the right decisions. Sometimes we actually pay for and get plane tickets for our own pain. Over the Christmas holiday, Lori and I watched the Netflix documentary, The Volcano, and it's called Rescue from Wakari. Some of you have probably seen it, fairly new documentary that's out. But apparently there were several companies, and this is off the coast of New Zealand. They featured this Wakari, or White Island, as basically a destination for thrill seekers, for people who wanted an adventure. And so they would take them out there to this island where there was a volcano and fly them out there in a helicopter and then guide them around the island, of course, and then bring them back, okay? So back on December 9th of 2019, 2 different groups went out there. 2 went by boat, and then there were several other people that got taken there by helicopter. These are thrill seekers, and they wanted to get on this island and see what it was all about and had to wear gas masks and all kinds of things like that. Even while a couple of them had actually, some of them had gotten into a boat, several of them were still on the rim of the volcano when the thing erupted. Can you imagine that? It was a horrible thing. So the documentary interviews the survivors. One was a young couple, and they had gone there on their honeymoon. Can you imagine that? They went there on their honeymoon when this thing erupted, and so on. It was so bad that the husband was burned so badly that he was in a coma for a whole month. His wife was burned badly too, so badly that they actually had to cut her brand new wedding band off of her finger. And since that time, since 2019, they've had multiple surgeries, and they've been through rehab, trying to get them back, physical rehab, trying to get them back in shape again, and so on. So they interviewed them, and you can see the scars on them, see the scars on the body. A woman says, I think about this every day. Some are good days, and some are really bad days, and they will have surgeries for the next years. In the interview, the guy says, it was a 2-minute eruption, and it will take years of surgery to recover from. And we will never fully recover. And they were the lucky ones. Out of 47 people that went to that island, went to Wakari, only 25 survived. Husband said this too, and he said this at the end of the interview. He said, I wish I had asked more questions. I wish I had asked more questions. He said, if I had known the full extent of the risk of going to that island, I would have never gone. So throughout these next 5 weeks, we're going to talk about 5 questions. And I'm telling you, if you ask these questions and if you answer them honestly, it could change the trajectory of your life. It could keep you from some of the worst pain that you've ever been through. And these are the questions, and we're going to be talking about them one at a time. Am I being honest with myself, really, about what I'm doing? What story do I want to tell? Like, this is going to be part of my story. What story do I want to tell? Is there a tension? Is there something that down inside is nagging me that I need to pay attention to? Is it wise? Is it wise? And the final question is, what would love have me do? What would love have me do? I believe that 2023 could be the best year of my life. It could be the best year of your life. If we're honest with ourselves, if we ask ourselves the right questions, if we make the kind of decisions that will take us forward in life instead of pushing us back. So I'm going to pray that God will use these questions this time to help us make great decisions. I want to thank you, God, that you have made us thinking creatures, that you've given us the ability to think ahead and forecast what will happen, to be honest with ourselves about what our motives really are, that you've given us the capacity for wisdom. And you've said if we ever lack wisdom, all we have to do is ask, and you'll give it to us. I pray that 2023 will be the year when we make some of the best decisions that we've ever made in our lives, with your power, with your wisdom, and with your help. Amen. So may God give you the wisdom today to know what you're to do. May he give you the wisdom in the months ahead when you come to strategic crossroads to decide what to do that will be best for your future, best for your story. And may he guide you into the ways of peace and love. Amen.